Hello, friends, and welcome to the last Thursday night of the month, Fiction Book Club. And so we are doing this month a fiction, and I want to stress that word, fiction, Nuclear War by Annie Jacobsen. Notice it says here, a scenario. So what she has done in her book is taken a presupposed scenario. In this case, it's going to be a nuclear attack on the United States by Korea, and how that escalates into a U.S.-Russia, I almost said Soviet, confrontation. And I'm going to show you why that's highly improbable that would happen. Now, then, a lot of the stuff in here is scientifically correct. I want to stress that. An awful lot of hyperbole. Using the very strongest possible warheads, putting them into populated areas for effect. Let me give you some ideas. But before we do that, okay. Thank you all for being here, and let me see. I know that for sure that I have Gil from Great Man Prepping. Thank you for being here, Gil. Scott Hummer. And then, of course, Sue Me. And who else do I have here? Anybody else yet? No, nobody. A Little Lone Prepper. Good to see you. I've got a total of 7 people watching. We will give them a couple minutes to come on. In the meantime, I want to separate fiction, okay, from nonfiction. So there are 2 books I really want to strongly recommend that you get for nonfiction when it comes to nuclear war. And I had the other one here, and I don't know what I did with it. Oh, there it is. Right there. Okay, so I bought this one, $9.95. I bought this one when it first came out. I was at Field Station Augsburg in Augsburg, Germany. I was listening to the Third Shock Army at that time. Third Shock Army and 8th. Well, we got a little bit of the First Guards Tank Army. We got Third Shock Army. We got 8th Guards Army that we were primarily interested in for a group of Soviet forces, Germany. At that time, the United States had 4 divisions on our side, well, 4.5, let's call it. We had 3rd Corps had 2 divisions, 7th Corps had 2 divisions, and then we also had elements of the 1st Infantry Division, 1 brigade of the 1st Infantry Division forward up in the British area, the Rhine area. And that's why we had to have the other 2 brigades come over every year on what they called redeployment of forces to Germany, or reforger. But anyhow, so at Field Station Augsburg, we had the ability to look into across the east-west German border. So going from north down to south, we had 1st Guards Tank Army up north, 3rd Shock Army in the middle, 8th Guards Army down at the bottom. Then we had 20th Guards Army around Berlin, and then 2nd Tank Army was up in the northern area, right behind 1st Guards Tank Army. So we had 20 divisions of Soviets in East Germany. Then down on the Czech area, we had what was called the Southern Group of Forces. It wasn't considered an army. It was considered 2 corps, but it was also a total of 5 divisions. So our 4 divisions, plus the British, plus the West Germans, plus the French, were going to be taking on at least 25 Soviet divisions. And then, of course, you had follow-on forces, the Northern Group of Forces that were in Poland. So we were way outnumbered. And plus, I ought to do that. Let me show you what Field Station Augsburg looked like, and you'll see why we called it the ground zero of. I'm looking at Field Station Augsburg right now for the any Soviet missile attack. It was going to be ground zero. We said that the Flare 9, which was our direction finding antenna, was basically the target, the main target for the Soviets. So let me get here, and then I'm going to share screen. There we go, present, share screen. And we're going to go down here to share screen, and we're going to do Augsburg. Okay, so here's Field Station Augsburg. And this area here is the Flare 9 antenna. Now, this is the building. So here's the building. You can see the cars over here in the parking lot on the left-hand side. You can see the cars down here on the bottom. This area right here, this building down at the very bottom, one-story building, was the mess hall. So we had pretty close to 2,000 people working here in 4 different shifts, so 500 people per shift. It was manned 24 hours a day. You worked 6 days, 2 days off, 6 swings, 2 days off, and then 6 mids, 2 days off. So it was a 6 and 2 rotating trick. And then this was the headquarters over here, and all the rest of this was intercept positions. And this was our intercept antenna, intercept and direction finding antenna. And there were 7 of those throughout the world. So that's Field Station Augsburg. And you can see why with that big antenna, that was a natural target for anything that was coming in from the Soviets. So, that's kind of what it was. Devil Dog Prepper, good evening. Welcome. Good to see you. We're up to 12 people here now. So anyhow, I was at Augsburg when I bought this book for $9.95 at Stars and Stripes bookstore in Augsburg. The new edition came out in 2022, right after the walk-in of the Russians into the former capital of Russia. Back in the earlier times, it was Kievan Rus. So that was this was put out right after that. So this is an updated version of this one. Not that much has changed. I'm going to say that is, in my opinion, the best book on nuclear war and on nuclear weapons and how to survive a nuclear attack there is. I'm going to say this is a fantastic one as well. This is Critical Nuclear War Survival Skills by Carlos Mack. We just finished his other book, one of his other books, the Prepper Pantry, with our nonfiction book club. So that's where we are with that. Okay, so let's take this theory of Miss Jacobsen's and put a little bit of test to it. So the theory is that it starts off with the Koreans launching a Dofeng 4 ICBM from their field around Pyongyang into Washington, D.C. Now, at the same time that they're just after they launched this rocket into D.C., and I'm going to say that probably 70% of the book is hyperbolic. The body is standing there, and all of a sudden it's vaporized, and all that's left is the charred remains of a shadow on the asphalt. Really great writing, but the bad thing is it's stressing all of the negative effects of a nuclear blast. Okay, so it's in a timeline. Takes up like the first 2 hours of a nuclear war, and everything is going to happen back and forth, and what happens in the command center at the White House, at Cheyenne Mountain, at Site R, all these different places. They try to evacuate the president. And that's exactly, if you remember, we just recently had a helicopter crash with a jet that was landing at Ronald Reagan Airport. That helicopter was practicing doing what they're talking about in this book, and that is evacuating the president from the White House to Site R to get him underground in case of a nuclear attack on Washington, D.C. So I'm going to say the vast majority of this is written for effect. You have to consider, why do people write books? And I'm going to tell you that the reason that this person did, they're a peacenik, and they want to scare you into opposition of anything military or the possibility of a nuclear war. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, just be aware that's their goal. I can tell you the slant that is taken in this book with just a couple of facts. Number one, she quotes Carl Sagan and T-TAPS an awful lot. Now, what is T-TAPS? Well, it's the initials of the last names of the 4 students that Carl Sagan, of Carl Sagan's, that he had co-authored this report about nuclear winter that he wrote. So basically, if you will back up my theory of nuclear winter, I will give you your doctorate, okay, is basically how that works. And so they were Robert Turco, Owen Brian Toon, that's the TT, and then Thomas P. Ackerman, that's the A, James B. Pollock, that's the P, and then Carl Sagan is the S. So TTAPs is Turco, Toon, Ackerman, Pollock, and Sagan. They wrote this nuclear winter theory back in the 60s. We've had a couple chances to try that. We've seen where there's been an awful lot of smoke accumulation, Mount St. Helens, and the amount of stuff that was put into the sky. We've seen a couple other volcanic eruptions that of the same magnitude. We've seen Fukushima basically melt down. We've seen Chernobyl. Interesting thing about Chernobyl, I don't know if I'll get into this when we talk about one of my heroes, but Chernobyl is a cognated word. Okay, so the first word is cherno or chorny. Actually, chorny is the adjectival form. Cherno is the noun, and that means black. And then buil is the past tense of the verb buit, which is to be. So Chernobyl means it was black. So kind of prophetic. Chernobyl means it was black. But anyhow, so it's just one of those strange things. But anyhow, we've seen the effects of that. Probably one of the greatest things that we've seen that would emulate what Dr. Sagan proposed would be during the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait. When they began evacuating Kuwait, they set all the oil fields on fire. So, there was close to over 500 oil wells that were on fire, all kinds of soot going up into the air, which would be approximately equal to a couple nukes going off. And all that soot did not cause the nuclear winter that Carl Sagan had predicted. We've also seen catastrophic fires. We've seen Mauna Loa blow up, and then, of course, all the fires that happened in Hawaii. Those have not caused the amount of soot, smoke, and degradation of sunlight on the Earth as Dr. Sagan proposed either. So we've had a lot of emulations or simulations of a nuclear exchange that just have not been as catastrophic as Dr. Sagan proposed. Some of the other things I find interesting about this book is every news broadcast that she quotes is from CNN. And every politician, quote, expert that she quotes is also from either the Obama administration or the Clinton, Obama, or Biden administrations. So, you kind of get this feeling that she has something she's trying to push. So just be cautious when you read it and watch out for those things. So let's get into a couple things here first. The first one is so the first thing I want to encourage you to do is in the book, both in this book as well as in this book, there are highly probable list of targets that would be of interest to the our counterparts taking out. Okay. Now, to be totally honest with you, populated centers probably are not going to be it. Another thing that I want to explain is the difference between an air burst and a ground burst. So an air burst is going to have maximum destructive capability over a broader area. I'm going to show that to you here in a bit. Max Wellerstein has done some outstanding work on air burst versus ground burst or surface burst. With an air burst, there is minimum fallout. As long as the fireball of the burst does not touch the earth, there is very minimal fallout. You're going to have direct radiation, and that's going to be primarily any radiation that you receive is going to be the direct radiation, alpha, beta, gamma. Now, with a surface burst or a subsurface burst, what you're doing there is you're contaminating the earth because anything that is in contact with that fireball becomes irradiated. Okay, that's the transfer of electrons and makes it become nuclear in a sense or radioactive. So all of that stuff gets superheated. Okay, as it gets superheated, it becomes lighter than air. It goes up into that mushroom cloud. The prevailing winds aloft carry it downwind, and as it cools, it begins to fall to earth. Now, it's going to appear as dust. So it's going to be just like particles of dust falling from the sky and coming down. Those are radioactive particles that we call fallout. So that's the one we don't want to happen because that's going to contaminate everything. So, in my opinion, most of the major players in the world want our resources and our ability to grow food. They don't want to contaminate it with surface bursts. Now, there are a couple places they will probably use surface bursts, anywhere where they think that we have something underground. Okay. Now, in my opinion, I don't think they're going to attack our nuclear underground silos. And the reason I don't think that is because it's a waste of a missile. It takes about 30 minutes from the time it goes from Russia to the United States. During that 30 minutes, we're going to identify that we're under attack. We're going to counterattack. So why would you launch a missile at a presumably empty missile silo? You're probably going to choose other targets. Okay. The list of targets in both Carlos Mack's book as well as in this book, I think, are very, very good, very well thought out on what they are. So, she talks about the Missile Warning Center in Cheyenne Mountain Complex. That'll probably be a surface burst. National Military Command Center, the Pentagon, that'll be an air burst. Global Operations Center at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, air burst. She talks about all these different targets. And I think those are very appropriate. Fort Hood, not a target. Now, why would I say that an entire U.S. Army division is not a target? What threat is an armored division, actually in this case it's a cavalry division, at Fort Hood, Texas? What threat is that to the Soviet Union if you've taken out all of the ports and all of the air transport? It's a dead weight. It's going to sit in Fort Hood, Texas, Killeen, Texas, and it's going to ride out the war there because it can't move. It's a dead paperweight. That's with any U.S. Army, U.S. Marine, Reserve, National Guard unit. They're going to be more worried about taking out our transport capabilities, whether that be ship or air. They're going to be more worried about our command and control facilities, our other defenses, air defenses, etc. Hi, Andy. Welcome. Good to see you. And I see that Pete, Triple G Farms, has joined us. Good evening. Good to see you as well. I asked Andy to come keep me. He's another retired warrant officer. He was primarily SEAL support in the Navy. So he's going to keep me straight this evening. He's going to straighten me out if I say anything that's that in his opinion is incorrect as well. So we got two people who kind of specialize this on here tonight. So if anybody sees him say anything that adds value to this or corrects me, please let me know so I can get that straight. So anyhow, we've got all those targets straightened out. So please, the National Guard Battalion Armory down the street from you is not a target for an ICBM, guaranteed. Okay. If you're in a small town, you're not a target. If you have a factory in your hometown that produces 5.56 millimeter ammunition, it's not a target, because 5.56 millimeter ammunition in a strategic war is nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So this book will give you a really good detailed list of what we think the more strategic targets are going to be. So during the 1960 nuclear strike plan against Moscow, as relayed to us by John Rubel, the nuclear fallout, remember this is a surface burst, numbers in China alone included half the population of China. Today, that would mean more than 700 million Chinese citizens would be dead from radiation poisoning after a nuclear strike on Russia. As I said, Lee's opinion, we are not going to use, nobody wants to contaminate the earth. We are not going to use that many surface bursts. We're going to primarily use a surface burst against a dug-in, entrenched command center. That's going to be or some of our nuclear submarine bases that are like the ones we had the Germans had in Normandy. Let me see here. I see some questions, so let me catch up. Said hi, Rebecca. Hi, good evening. So happy to see you, Scott. I think I said Andy, Tammy, Pete. The war will be over way before any of those airplanes get built, Scott. So I would not worry about it that much at all. If Dallas-Fort Worth is going to get hit, it's going to get hit for other reasons, not because of the manufacturing. Not when it takes a year to manufacture something and this war is going to be over in 24 hours, not a target. Okay. And if it is, you can come down here and kick my bottom. Okay. Let me see. Chemical disposal west of Salt Lake City, Utah, not an issue. They aren't going to. In this book, she does bring up a very plausible point, and I'll bring that up in a minute. Chemical depots, ammunition depots, not going to be strategic targets. Okay, we're more worried about strategic targets and anti-missile. The super low frequency transmitters that we have in Maine. Help me, Andy. I think the other one's on the border between Georgia and South Carolina. And then the third one is in Washington, and we have a fourth one in Hawaii. But these are super low frequency transmitters that are down in the kilohertz. And when the E6 command and control plane flies, it has an antenna that flies behind it. So if you watch it in any of the flight path programs, you'll see that it makes these big circular loops. Well, the reason is because it's got a mile-long antenna trailing behind it. And that's so that it can communicate with the submarines at sea, because we're using the ocean, the salt water in the ocean, as an antenna, basically. So that, remember, the lower the frequency, the longer or larger the antenna has to be. The higher the frequency, okay, so when we start talking about VHF, UHF, this is a VHF, very high frequency, ultra high frequency antenna. So then when you start talking about HF antennas, the one I showed you, Field Station Augsburg, that one that takes up 9 football fields, that's an HF antenna, an HF direction finding antenna. No, major financial areas probably will not be targeted. It's not a strategic asset at all. Okay, let me get down here. Higgy Homestead, good evening. Good to see you. I think I said Utah Mike. I hope so. If not, then welcome Utah Mike. Okay, Stratcom. So some of those places. So let me get here to this next tab that I have that I want to talk about. While experts disagree on whether a North Korean submarine could realistically sneak up close to the U.S. and launch a missile, and in this case, they have a submarine approaching the West Coast, and they hit the Diablo, which is Spanish for devil, nuclear power plant just north of San Bernardino. And and that causes a meltdown. And a meltdown is far more dangerous than is a nuclear explosion. Okay. So Ted Postel maintains that it's most certainly could. It would be a tricky operation, but not impossible. I've done some analysis. I wouldn't rule it out. Well, the problem is that you've got these two, they've only got 2 ocean-going submarines right now. The rest of them are mostly coastal defense, and they're old diesel submarines. I think they're called OCO. No, they're not. I forget they're called. But the last I checked, the North Koreans only had 2. Of course, they only need 1 to hit us, but they've only got 2 long-range strategic submarines that are capable of carrying missiles. So we have to take that into consideration. Now, here's the thing: they have to make it. And these are diesel submarines, and diesel submarines make an awful lot of noise. So our destroyers and our naval vessels out in the Pacific Ocean and our anti-submarine aircraft would pick those up in a heartbeat. And the minute we are attacked by an ICBM from North Korea, you know that any and all aircraft and sea vessels are going to be targeted by our Navy. It's just going to be, that's the way it's going to be. So I don't think the Navy, their submarines would make it anywhere close to our coast. I have a problem on page 187. She says soldiers armed with assault rifles. The only assault rifle that the U.S. Army has ever had was the Browning automatic rifle. Well, and actually that wasn't even called an assault rifle. So the Russians actually came up with the term assault rifle. Actually, it was the Germans. Yeah, it was the Germans who came up with the term assault rifle, and that was for the Maschinengewehr 42, for the machine gun 1942 model. And but Sumi asked, what is an E6? It's called a Prowler aircraft, and it's a command and control aircraft that flies over the U.S. It's also called the Doomsday plane. So we have like 6 of those in the U.S. inventory. One of them is always in the air over the United States, so that if anything happens to D.C., command and control can be transferred to the E6 flying over the United States. They usually fly a track over around Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, a little bit of Montana, but that general area. There's a big, long track that they fly, a big circle around. So that's kind of Gray Man Prepping is talking about it is not a rank level, Gil. That's one of my pet peeves. It's not a rank level, it's a pay grade. Okay. The rank is staff sergeant. The pay grade for a staff sergeant is E6. So E stands for enlistedness is 6th grade up. But in E6 in the Air Force would be a tech sergeant. And then in the Navy, it would be a first class petty officer. In the Marine Corps, it'd be a staff sergeant. So E6 is a pay grade. But in this case, we're actually talking about an aircraft designation. They refer to the electronic aircraft with E's typically. Okay, so, but he says soldiers armed with assault rifles. They are not assault rifles. We call them rifles or carbines. And that can either be the M16 or the M4. It's a rifle or a carbine. That's how we refer to them. Assault rifle is one of those terms used by the left for anti-gun type stuff. The civilian version, the AR-15, has a selector switch that does not allow burst or automatic fire. It only allows single shot, pull the trigger once, 1 bullet comes out, whereas the military versions pull the trigger once, either 3 bullets come out or 20 or 30, depending upon your magazine. But there's a big difference between the civilian and military versions. So the civilian version is called a sporting rifle, and then the military version is either a military M16, M4 carbine. So we call them either a rifle or a carbine, but we don't use the term assault rifle. Back in 2003, when President George W. Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney wanted to get rid of the president of Iraq, they put forth a narrative about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction, a story full of colorful details like yellow cake uranium from Africa, and got the entire U.S. Congress to go along with the lie. False. Okay. We did know that they had SS-1 Scuds. We also know that they had Frog 7s, and Frog stands for Free Rocket Over Ground. It was a divisional asset, much like our Lance rocket. And these were capable of having either nuclear or chemical or biological weapons. They had been used against Iran. And so that's what we were looking for. And we did not find any Scuds, SS-1s. We did not find any Frog 7s. However, 3rd of the 63rd Armored Battalion, 1st Infantry Division, 7th Corps, found a cache of 152 millimeter GB and VX shells, which are chemical munitions, weapons of mass destruction. When we presented those to Nancy Pelosi, she said, oh, those don't count. Those aren't the weapons of mass destruction you were looking for. So even though we found WMD, the left continues to say, no, there wasn't any. It was a big lie. Because it wasn't the WMD that they wanted us to look for. Okay, so they talk about the VLF transmitters in Cutler, Maine, population 500. The Gem Creek Naval Radar Station, a radio station in Arlington in Washington State, and the third one is Lualua, Hawaii. Okay, now what's the last one here? What's my last tab here? The concept of nuclear winter first caught the world's attention in October 1983 when Parade magazine, then read by more than 10 million Americans, featured on its cover a spooky image of a darkened Earth and the news of a special report inside, authored by one of the world's most famous scientists, Carl Sagan. Well, he became famous because of this theory. Up until then, really nobody had heard of him. Sagan and his former students, James Pollock, the four that I told you about, the T-TAPs. Ackerman was a meteorologist and Turco was a meteorologist, laid out in horrifying detail in a paper published 2 months later in the Journal of Science. So like I said, that's never been proven, although some computer models have said that it is highly probable. But still, we've got new evidence as a result of volcanoes, as a result of forest fires, oil field fires, and everything else, that probably is not going to be as extreme. Now, I would still recommend that you consider what are you going to do if sunlight coming down to the earth is reduced by 80%? So I was having a conversation with Sue, and my solar system and my battery backup will be no good in a nuclear winter. There's just not going to be enough sunlight coming down. So one of the things we might want to do is have some greenhouses with some grow lamps so we can keep food growing, maybe even larger ones so we can get some grass growing for animals, for wildlife, because it just won't be there. And so with this nuclear winter, if it lasts 10 years, like Sagan says, then of course there's going to be a die-off because there won't be any plants, foliage, or animals as far as what's going to be left, okay? So now let's get into the reality of this, okay? So let's start off with, which one is this? We did a study right after World War II, and it went through Korea, and we haven't done it again since Korea. But I wanted to go back. Wait a minute, 1 second. I want to go back and check on your comments because I'm talking so much I may have missed something important. Let me see here. Scott, once again, thank you for putting the links to people's website or YouTube channels. I greatly appreciate that. No, there's no such thing as a lowly E6. There's everybody has everybody has a job. When I left Field Station Augsburg, no, it wasn't. It was when I left the 307th MI Battalion in Stuttgart. I had served a short while as the mess officer. And so the cooks have 2 shifts, okay? The morning shift works from like 4 a.m. until 1 p.m. And then the evening shift works from like 11 a.m. until like 8 p.m. So whoever worked nights that one night, they get home, get very little sleep. They come back in for the early morning. So they get a full almost 24 hours off afterwards. I mean, it is, and all they get is complaints. So when I left the 307th, I took a case of beer to each one of the 2 shifts of cooks and told them how much I appreciated them. And then when I was teaching the MI Officer Advanced course at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, these guys, okay, no, that's 303rd at Fort Hood. There it is. No, yeah, there we go. No, that's 207th. Where's my? Oh, here it is. Here's Fort Huachuca here. So anyhow, when I was teaching there, I got called out of class. Our brigade commander, a colonel, came in and got me out of class. I thought I'd done something wrong. He took me into my boss's office, Major Kimura, and there was a surprise birthday party for me. And it was a full sheet cake, and then bug juice is what we call Kool-Aid, and coffee. And it was one of the cooks had been assigned to Fort Huachuca that I had given that thank you case of beer to at 307th. And so let me tell you, a little bit of appreciation goes a long way. When you take care of the troops, regardless of rank, regardless of their position or their job or function, when you realize that the Army depends upon every single job. We're all there to support the infantry. Everybody's there to support the infantry. And every job is important. I don't care whether you're a generator mechanic, a cook, a supply sergeant, everybody has a function. And without that function, the infantry can't fight. So everybody is important. So there's no such thing as a lowly E6. Infrastructure, Gil says infrastructure might become a capture target. Absolutely. If an occupation invasion is planned. Otherwise, they might become targets if the event drags on. Even if they are targets, they're going to be an airburst target. They're not going to be a surface burst. So it's going to be up above. Let me see. Trying to catch up here, see if there's any more questions before I go on to some other things. Okay, so my favorite story, podpolkovnik Stanislav Petrov. So one of my favorite Russian words, podpolkovnik. So polk, P-O-L-K, is a regiment, and a polkovnik is a leader of a regiment or a colonel. Pod is under. So an under regimental commander is basically a battalion commander or a lieutenant colonel. So on September 26, 1983, podpolkovnik Stanislav Petrov was the officer in charge of the Oko radar system that the Soviets had installed. This is the same as ours. It's basically a satellite-based system. So it detects launches of U.S. missiles in the United States and warns the Soviet Union at that time of an impending missile attack on the Soviet Union, giving them the maximum amount of time to react to it. So all these radars were going off that all of a sudden one missile had been launched from the U.S. and had not been announced. All of a sudden there were 5 missiles on the Oko, and it was saying that they were being attacked. Well, the Soviets, the study that we did, I go back to, I forgot to finish that, 85% of U.S. combat soldiers in World War II and Korea did not shoot to kill. They either shot to suppress or above or hesitated before pulling the trigger. It's against man's basic instincts to kill another human being, okay? We have to operate with that as just a premonition of most human beings, is that we do not voluntarily want to take another person's life, which is why I say that anybody who kills another person is automatically should be considered insane, because you have to be in a temporary state of insanity in order to take another person's life. It's my philosophical point of view. You don't have to agree with it. But he refused to alert Moscow that there was an attack on the Soviet Union. And the reason he did was because he used what we call common sense. Why would the United States, with hundreds of ICBMs, initiate an attack against the Soviet Union with only 5 missiles? It did not make any sense to him. So sure enough, within another 15 minutes, all of those they found out were blips caused by a combination of the Milnia orbit that they were using, along with the rising sun and clouds. So the clouds, the rising sun reflecting off the clouds into the Milnia orbit, and all of a sudden they had blips that said they were missile launches when they really weren't. He was he wasn't given any awards. He wasn't court-martialed. He was allowed to retire. Then he went to work for the Oko radar manufacturer. Significance behind this is that it was 3 weeks after the shootdown of KAL-007. So let me show you some stuff here. Okay, so yeah, that's the one I want. So we're going to do a presentation here. And then I'm going to tell you about Oko. Share screen. And I think this is it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so what I want to point out to you is KAL-007 was flying from Anchorage, Alaska. Can you see this, I hope? Let me see. Yeah, you can. Good. Okay, so KAL-007 was flying from Anchorage, Alaska to, if you have a straight flight here, the Great Circle flight, to to South Korea. Notice that the Great Circle flight takes it over Kamchatka, and it also takes it over Sakhalin. So in Russian, when they say you're going to the sticks, they say proverit na Kamchatku. You're going, or no, poslavit na Kamchatku. We're sending you to the far reaches, the gulag, basically. This is where a lot of the gulags were. This is considered as far away from civilization as you can get on the mainland of Russia or the USSR. So notice that the flight was intended to bypass Soviet airspace down here, come down over just south of Hokkaido and over Honshu, and then into Seoul. And instead, with some trajectory errors on their systems and a lack of IFF, identification friend or foe, they flew over Kamchatka. Okay. Then they were flying over Sakhalin. So when they flew over Sakhalin is when they were intercepted by the Soviet Air Force and shot down just north of Hokkaido. Okay. So remember, this is fresh in the minds of the Soviets. This is 3 weeks after this happened. And there was a major uproar about this, that he had these false images of an attack coming against the Soviet Union. So a lot of the defenses were up because they expected us to do something about it, and we didn't. So Sue, you have a great point. I'll get to that here in just a second. So he was just fantastic in what he did. Absolutely, Scott. And he went against sound doctrine, even though it would have been verified by somebody else. So the oko in Russian means eye. Okay. So it's a very famous portion of the eye is Oči čornia, oči strastnia, oči skučnia I прекрасния. Как люблю я вас, как боюсь я вас, знать вас I na добрый час. So basically, dark eyes, what blissful eyes, penetrating eyes, frustrating eyes. I adore you, but I'm afraid of you. I met your power in an ill-fated hour. Good old Russian music. Let me give you another good one that is to give you the mindset of the Soviet and of the Russian. This is just unbelievable when you translate it, but you know how you try to translate things figuratively and you try to translate things literally. When we say, don't cry over spilled milk, okay? So if you take that figurative translation of after something's happened, don't worry about it. The Russian way of saying it is very morbid. They say, snavshi galava, ni plachete nad velasami. So after the executioners cut your head off, don't worry about the length of your hair. So getting a haircut is too late now, right? So it's kind of the don't cry over spilled milk. Don't worry about the length of your hair after your head's been cut off. Strange people. But I will tell you that I am not that afraid of them, to be honest with you. Great question. I'm going to hold off on Sumi's question because it's such a great one, but I do want to answer it. Oh, yeah, Pete, absolutely. I don't know if there was a congressman aboard it. Yes, there was. Yes, and that's what Pete's talking about. There was a U.S. congressman aboard it. There were like 27 different countries had passengers on that flight to Seoul. So let's take her book and let's take a look at something here real quick. Let me show you another one. This is A Great Circle. And I want to show you why I don't believe that her book is realistic and it has a chance a snowball's chance in the hot place of ever occurring. And let me show you why. So first off, she says that a rocket is going to be launched. And I want to make sure that this is showing. Yep. So this is Great Circle map. Okay. So you use a great circle. It always shows the best, shortest distance between two points using the globe. which quite often is going to be not a straight line latitudinally, which would be this way, or longitudinally, which would be, straight up. So the best short path for an ICBM from Pyongyang, Korea, North Korea, to Washington, D.C. is going to take it pretty close to over the pole. But notice a couple things. We just learned where Kamchatka, Sakhalin, the vast majority of the Russian Federation is, at that time called the Soviet Union. Notice that this whole area right here is basically Russia. There's a little bit of China in here. So first, this ICBM being launched from North Korea has to go a little bit over China, a lot over Russia before it even comes over Canada, and then from Canada into Washington, D.C. So that's why we have our defense early warning radar system here across Canada, the DEW line, and that tells us of any flights coming across the poles, because we're afraid of the European Soviets, Russians, launching from here across to us. So we're going to intercept this more than likely. We have all kinds of intercept capability, especially in the Navy. But look at all of our allies or even our adversaries who are going to be opposed to this missile flying over that distance. So the Japanese are going to see it. Of course, the Canadians are going to see it. All the navies are going to see it. The Russians will see it. The Chinese will see it. Somebody will do something. They don't want a war to start. Okay. So that's taking a look at their launch towards us. That's a flight time of around 30 minutes from Pyongyang to Washington, D.C. Okay, let me get rid of that one. Okay, so next I want to talk about so she says that they launch, then they launch a sub-launch. I've already talked about the sub-launched nuclear warhead against the Diablo power plant outside of Santa Barbara, California, basically. And so now we've had 2 nuclear attacks on the U.S. So the U.S. decides that they're going to do a counterattack against North Korea with our ICBMs and with our submarine-launched ballistic missiles and submarine-launched cruise missiles. And don't forget, we have Osan Air Force Base in South Korea that has air-launched cruise missiles. We have Misawa Air Base in Japan. We have an entire fleet up around that area with submarine-launched as well as surface-launched cruise missiles. We're not going to be totally dependent upon an intercontinental ballistic missile going over. But if we did, here's what would look like. And I want to show you the targets that I believe might be of some importance for us to take a look at in the Soviet Union or Russia. And that is, here's Russia. So we're talking about North Korea is here, okay? Here is Kamchatka, right? And notice that there is a nuclear ICBM launch site here in Kamchatka. There's one just south of Sakhalin, which they thought that airplane was flying over. It flew over this one, and it was flying down towards this one because it was off course, and that's when they shot it right about here. So there's 3 nuclear ICBM things in this area. In this whole area, from about here east, maybe 15 to 20% of the total Russian population. The Ural Mountains are about here, and that divides, it goes down here to the Caspian Sea. So right about here is the Ural Mountain range. 80% of the population of Russia is west of the Ural Mountains. So that's this area here, okay? Here's Ukraine, here's Belarusia and Poland. And so this is where 85% of their population is. So if we were going to strike, we would strike this, not this out here, where there's nothing out here. Remember, the Russians even admit that going here is going to the sticks, okay? So get that in your mind as far as what we would be attacking and what we would not be attacking. So would an attack by the U.S. on the North Koreans be misinterpreted as an attack on Russia? So let's take a look at that now. Let's take a look at the Great Circle. Where is my great circle? There it is. I'm not finding my great circle here. Nuke map, missiles. Oh, there we go. There it is. I have so many tabs open with all these things I want to show you that it's pitiful. So now we're launching from our ICBM fields in Minot, North Dakota. Okay. So if we're firing towards Pyongyang, look at the trajectory that ICBM would take from Minot to Pyongyang. Here's Kamchatka. Here's Sakhalin. Okay. So, and here is Siberia, right? Very unpopulated area of Russia. So if we were going to attack North Korea, this would be the flight path of our ICBMs. If we were going to attack basically Russia or the Soviet Union, this would be the flight track of our ICBMs. So flying from Minot to Moscow or to the European portion of Russia are two totally different tracks. They would see that they were totally different tracks, and I think they would react accordingly if they were going over this way, especially if they caught that missile launching from Pyongyang towards the U.S. And of course, with all the human intelligence they have inside the U.S., operators telling them, yes, that there was a nuke strike against D.C., with a lot of the news networks going offline, things like that, Moscow would know that it's North Korea, U.S., not U.S., Russia. And there would be other Colonel Petrovs out there as well. I am quite sure of that. So that's something I just want to show you, that to give you an idea of what's really important. Okay, so that's why I think this book is, in some sense, poo-poo. Okay, now a lot of the stuff they give you about what's going on as far as the nuclear scare, yeah, it's valid. One of the things I do want you to bear in mind, however, is everybody goes with total tonnage of nuclear warheads. Not every nuclear warhead is on an ICBM or on an air-launched or submarine-launched or a sea-launched cruise missile. The ones that I would be afraid of, however, are what they call the caliber, K-E-L-I-B-R, caliber. And we call them Club K, but it's basically a cruise missile that's been fit inside of a standard 54-foot cargo container that they put on a cargo ship. So now they put those on top of a cargo ship. The top folds up, the launch pad comes up, and then they have a cruise missile that they can launch from a cargo ship. That means that they could turn Los Angeles Harbor, San Francisco Harbor, New York Harbor, any of our harbors into a nuclear launch pad with this caliber system that they have, Club K or the Club launch system. So I just want to kind of bring you up to date on that. Let me see here. Charlie Wilson, basically Afghanistan. Absolutely, Utah Mike. Thule, Greenland, which is on the west coast, is one of our strategic air defense posts. And then we also, the one after that, the next one over, was we used to have one in Goose Bay, Labrador. And that's been shut down. That's been taken over entirely by the Canadians. But we used to have Thule, Greenland, Goose Bay, Labrador, and then we went across the northern tier of the United States over into Alaska. But the Canadians have assumed all responsibility for their area, and then we are only responsible for the U.S. We still have a little presence in Thule, and then it picks up, and NATO has the rest of the responsibility from Greenland east. So yeah, Greenland becomes extremely important to us for anti-missile defense. Now, let me tell you one of the things that I think is one of the biggest screw-ups in U.S. history. President Reagan really wanted to get the strategic missile defense system up and running. And it was going to be Star Wars, right? We were going to have the capability with satellite-launched anti-ballistic missiles that would come down and negate any launches that were launched against the United States. That never finished. But it was enough of a scare to where it drove the Soviet Union bankrupt, basically, them trying to catch up with that. Because of what we believe to be the proposed efficiency of Stargate, we stopped funding our underground bunkers. We had a whole bunch of civil defense bunkers up until the 80s, and we had to keep them stocked. Well, in order to be effective, they had to be open to the public. But when you have a shelter open to the public and you have to put in water, food, sanitation supplies, all this kinds of stuff, that was being robbed. It was being stolen all the time. And you couldn't have a guard on there 24 hours a day. So they were very expensive to operate and maintain. So the Star Wars Defense Initiative, SDI, was going to assume that role, so we no longer needed any of the underground shelters, the fallout shelters. Strategic error, in my opinion. We still need those. Yes, Scott, you're absolutely right. They also have a lot of very valuable mineral things. There's one more thing I want to show you, and because people say, if nuclear war happens, I just want to be at ground zero. I don't think, so I want to show you something here. This is by Max Wellerstein. I really admire this guy. He's really got his poo-poo together in one burn bag, folded 3 times and stapled twice. I mean, he has got it together. So he created this, and I think I've shown it to you once before, but I think it's just one of the best tools out there. This website is called nuclearsecrecy.com/nuke map. So if you just go and do a Google search for nuke map, NUKEMAP, you'll find it. So I'm going to move this down to Austin, Texas, so that you can see. I'm going to do this for me. Okay, Austin, Texas, go. Okay, I'm going to also take here. I'm going to take a preset. So I'm going to use the Dongfeng 5, which is the largest oppositional ICBM that there is, and it's actually by China. The Russians don't have anything this powerful. The Russians do have the Tsar Bomba, but that's delivered by a Tu-36, and that prop-driven aircraft is not going to fly over anywhere in the United States. So we're going to do the Dongfeng 5, a 5-megaton bomb, drop it on Austin, Texas. We want to calculate casualties and radioactive fallout. So we're going to do an air burst first. Okay, we're going to detonate it. So I'm up here in Round Rock. Okay, so notice that here, I want to actually come down here. Come on over here. So it gives you everything. So the thermal radiation radius is here. The light blast radius is way out here, all the way up to Round Rock. No, let me see. Oh, come on. Cooperate with me here, mouse. I want it over here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the fireball radius is inside here. The moderate blast damage is, so this is heavy blast damage in here, moderate here. Thermal radiation, so heat, things will start on fire out to here, and then light blast damage out to here. That's it. No fallout to speak of from this, okay? Now, I recommend when you get up in the morning, if you're afraid of a nuclear attack on the U.S., go to a website called windy, windy.com, and see what the prevailing winds are. Notice there's a flag here that's showing the wind direction, current wind direction, okay? So we're going to go back up here and we're going to redetonate this, but only we're going to do now a ground burst or a surface burst instead of an air burst. Notice the difference here. So we've got a smaller diameter as far as the actual thermal and blast radius, but look at what we've got as far as fallout now. So this is the radioactive fallout pattern. So this is how remember we talked about the things that are in contact with the fireball become irradiated, get superheated, go up into that mushroom cloud, get caught by the winds aloft. And remember that flag we showed you the prevailing winds right now. So the prevailing winds right now are going to carry that nuclear fallout to the northeast. So this is going to be a high radioactivity area here. are very high, let's call it high, moderate, and light, and none. Okay, so depending upon where you are, vis-a-vis being upwind, downwind is going to be extremely important. Now, if we take this same thing and move it down here to San Antonio, and then we detonate. Oops, I moved the wrong thing. I wanted to move that. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to go up here because we wanted to know about Carswell Air Force Base, Texas. Can we do that? No, we'll have to do Dallas. Okay, so we're going to reset this because I changed the wind direction. How am I going to do this? I know how I'll do this. I'll just do this. I'll reset the whole thing. And we'll go to Dallas. And then we'll let you go after that. Come on. Those are presets. I don't want presets. I want here. Dallas, Texas. We're going to go with 5 megatons. No, it's 5 megatons, so it's 5,000 kilotons. We're going to do an air burst. And so there's what happens with an air burst as far as a 5 megaton, the largest that the Chinese have. Notice that in Dallas, Fort Worth is not affected. DFW is barely affected. Six Flags will still be there. Now, if we do a surface burst and redetonate, okay, it looks like the winds right now are pretty good. Or did I leave that wind flag down around San Antonio? No, it looks like, yeah, I did a surface burst. So, oh, that's why. I didn't do the radioactive fallout. That's why. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so your winds are to the northeast as well. So now we see what's going to happen. It says estimated fatalities down here, 358,000 roughly killed with 540,000 injured. So about 1 million people as a result of that. And take a look at the fallout pattern all the way up into the Ozarks. Okay. So that's a good one. Just look up Nuke Map, N-U-K-E-M-A-P, and you can play with it to your heart's content there. And so that's pretty much where we are this evening. So I just want to tell you, I think there's a lot of hyperbole. I think there's a lot of anti-war propaganda. I think it's written as a fear-mongering book to scare people away. Some of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that she has in here, the actual effects of a radioactive bomb, is accurate. They make the assumption that everything's going to be ground surface burst. I don't believe that it will be surface burst, my personal opinion. I believe that it will be air burst, the predominant amount of it. I don't think that we'll have any Korean submarines launching. However, I am afraid of Russian Club K. Now, I will tell you, every country on the face of the earth wants to occupy the U.S. and get our resources except for two. They want to obliterate us, and they don't care if they do away with themselves in the process. And the two that want to obliterate us at any and all costs are North Korea and Iran. So those are the two that I think that we really have to be concerned about if they were to ever to attack us on a nuclear attack. So let's see if there's any other questions here. Yeah, Round Rock High School had the NCAA championship high school baseball team for quite a while when my daughter was attending. I don't know how they're doing now. And then Pete says, don't have the wind blow south, please, on the surface burst. It doesn't end well for me. Yeah, from Dallas, absolutely. You're good if if they target Austin. And they wouldn't target Fort Hood, but the only reason they probably target Austin is because it's number 11 in population in the U.S. right now. So that's kind of where we are. Thoughts? Was that any value to you this evening as far as understanding that good stuff, bad stuff. Don't let it scare you. A nuclear war is survivable as long as you take precautions now, understand the effects of it, prepare for it, become knowledgeable about it. Get this book, memorize this book. I think that if you have a copy of this book, you're going to be very, very satisfied. Oh gosh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I think you'll be very satisfied with the contents of it, and it won't do you bad to have this book either. So those are some things I would recommend for you. Okay, let's see if we can't get this closed down and get everybody to bed. See if I can't get my coughing and sneezing under control. The book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 24, 25, 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So remember, we are all in this together. With a little bit of knowledge, you can survive. Please continue to be kind, polite, and respectful to each other. I just absolutely love this community. I love the way you interact with each other in the chat. You are constantly impressing me with your level of knowledge as well as your level of respect for each other and how kind and helpful you are to each other. Hello, NC Farmer. Good evening. Thank you so much for that, because the only way we're going to survive this is if we do it together. Lone wolves won't survive. Thanks for being here, everybody. Next month, we're going to do Black Autumn by Kirkham and Ross. That is basically the book that was modified a little bit. They changed it from happening in Salt Lake City to happening outside of Colorado City, Colorado. They changed it from the interaction of the Ross estate versus the Mormon church to the Ross estate versus the local community. There are some changes in it. Great book, strongly recommend it. I am currently also reading the one for it's in my other room. I'm reading the follow-up to that book, so that'll be the month after that. But next, for the end of March, we're going to be doing Black Autumn by Kirkham and Ross. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.